We'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, Jen.
Shelley Fayette,
Janiha.
Anita Mack,
Present.
Sharmel Gillen,
Esquasi Sukali.
Carol Langford, Len Tutis,
Here.
Bing Matt, Ellie Bundy, Martin Charlo,
Present.
Mike Dolson,
I'm here.
James Still Senior.
Okay. We have a quorum present. We have minutes from August 12th. Oh, prayer. Sorry. I knew something wasn't right. Mike, can you lead us in prayer this morning, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Creator, in your all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving way, bless us throughout the day. Give us all your blessings as we do the work of our tribe. And if you'll all join me in saying, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Okay. That wildfire smoke is getting to my brain. It's giving me brain fog. Now we have a set of minutes from August 12th. So Abby, on page 7, when we had the elders discussion, about halfway down, it says we have been in touch with, it should be the Native American Boarding School Coalition. Who provided information on education and advocacy. And they spoke of Marcia Small, who does above ground surveying. And the Ursulines was one of the places that she had information on.
Madam Chair,
Ellie?
Abby, on the first page under the members absent, it says I was at the Montana Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Task Force. It's just the Missing Indigenous Persons Task Force for that one. Thanks.
Abby, on page 12, where it said our flag was carried in, if you can take out that sentence, because Arlene's the one that told me it was carried in by someone else, and then in the bottom, she clarified who actually carried it in, so just take out that sentence.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Bing.
Yeah, make a motion to approve the minutes of August 12th with corrections.
Okay, motion by Bing. Second by Charmel. Are there any other changes? If not, all those in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
Madam Chair, I'm going to abstain. I was absent.
Okay. Ellie abstains.
I was absent.
Anita abstains. Motion carries. Okay, we have an agenda for August 17th. I do have a council issue I wanted to add to the agenda.
Madam Chair, I just have one thing too that I'd like to discuss with council.
Second by Anita. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Okay, it looks like. No, maybe not. I thought Ron was here. Okay, so we're presenting, Forestry's presenting on behalf of the Bear team. Are we waiting for Ron or no? No? Okay. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Thanks for allowing us to come and present our results and findings with you. If you could just give me a minute to load the stick, we'll be ready to go here. So,
Sure. Cox, Ron.
Morning, council. Ron Swaney, Fire Management Officer for the tribes. So quite an exciting day yesterday, fire weather wise. it's something we had eyes on coming in, even through the transition of the 2700 road and obviously looking at the fire that we have called Crooks. So I'll start with the Crooks fire. Yesterday afternoon, it got hit with estimated 40-mile-an-hour winds up on top on the back end south side of that fire. And it made a substantial run. I think could be seen by everyone. Chugging pretty hard to the east and having a tendency to go southeast. It went into the Belmore Sloughs area. It's near Whitehorse Lake. And those are all areas that we initially wanted to hold the fire at. So it stayed within our preliminary box, essentially. It showed itself about a half a mile west of the cabin, the South Fork cabin at the gate there, up high on that ridge. The fire stayed south of Jammer and didn't transition into that area. So over the last 2 days, the forest supervisor for the Lolo National Forest, I had an opportunity to take her up. I think her name is Catherine Upton. I met her at the Powell Grounds and took her up to look at the fire. They have interest. Historically, those fires have ran and challenged communities of Seeley Lake, Placid Lake. And this particular fire, we were looking at Lindbergh Lake. And they're in alignment with us with area closures and helped us figure out some things and helped us with some aviation assets and really have been a good ally for this fire. There's a guy working behind the scenes. His name's Trucker. And Trucker and I talk 5-6 times a day and talk about that fire specifically. And they've provided most of the aviation support to us. And this morning I had a chat with the Trucker, and he's got 3 heavy helicopters that are committed to work the Crooks fire. So this morning, what we're trying to do is we've looked at satellite imagery, some products that are provided by the NWCG and others to see where this fire sits. We pulled everybody from the line yesterday. Obviously, we had the Seeley folks head home through Missoula so that we didn't get anyone compromised. Big Robert McCrae is in charge of that fire, operating under Art Trahan. So we had Daryl Claremont and John Kyle Stevens scouting around, Doug Mays scouting around. We had Doug Mays went up to the lookout last night with Alex Moran, and they were getting eyes to see where this fire is lined up. And all the reports in so far are positive. So this fire might have gave us an opportunity to actually check up certain edges of it with that run yesterday, because where it was sitting, it was still inaccessible, nothing to anchor into, and very, very dangerous, obviously, fire behavior and potential. So with the forecast of weather that we have coming, I think we have a couple, 3 or 4 operational periods where we can get some work done now, checking some of the edge of that fire and establishing some line up against black. 100% chance of rain on that fire tonight, and it could be between 1 inch and 2 inches of rain, which would really be a significant impact of that fire and give us a chance to do some good work. So pretty impressed with how comfortable Robert was sitting in the saddle watching that thing go. A lot of stress, but he handled it well. So we held off on ordering a team until the smoke clears and we get some rain on that thing and see where it's at. I talked with the neighbors today and they're fine with that. The Seeley Lake Ranger came over yesterday, and the FMO from Seeley, his name's Phil. They met with Robert and had a good view and good talk on the fire. And so everything's moving forward, progressing. You can see the type of fire behavior that comes out of that complex fuel type. Once it gets established, there's not much you can do. And in that type of environment, that elevation, those types of trees, that's the type of fire behavior that you should expect. Once it gets established, once it builds momentum, there's nothing you can do but get folks out of the way. The Boulder Fire, Boulder 2700, Chris McCrae is running that as a trainee under Clint Davis. And they had a good operational period yesterday. There was a finger in the middle finger of that fire that we knew was going to have to move so that we could get on it. It's in a inaccessible spot again. You'd have, you know, downhill line construction with fire below you. It just wasn't in a good spot to engage. Yesterday afternoon, it moved up into the 2000 road up on top into the flat. There's a little plateau up there. And we've completed some management activities in there. And I thought, geez, we just recently burned up there, but it was 2003. We burned 300 acres of units up on top. So there's a lot of regen, road access, it's gentle slope, it's cat ground. And this morning we've got James Lozo and some heavy equipment pushing in lines up on top of that. So portions of it did actually hit the 2000. So we feel comfortable with where it's going. And ultimately that's where we knew we would be able to make a stand against the fire. So almost a fortuitous move for it to get up on top. So now we can get lines on that as well that are up against black, something that's secure. Just so you know, we're cooperating with everyone. We're letting everybody know what's going on. I'm sending text messages out to Shelley, Shana, and the regional office and the geographical area, and everybody's aware of what's going on. And the Crooks Fire right now is a lot of people's priorities. So we're going to get some support from our interagency partners for sure on that fire. So we got a recon flight this morning. It'll be Bart Trahan, Bob McCrae, and Daryl will be flying. We'll have John Kyle and Stevens and Doug Mays trying to find out the edge on the ground, and then Big Rob obviously overseeing everything. So we're in a good spot. It was some anxious moments yesterday, but we held up, and now I think the weather's going to give us an opportunity. So any questions or concerns, I guess, at this point for those fires?
When will we get an updated map?
So that's a great question. We're trying to get a map right now as they fly around it. We're going to get an updated map. It's a helicopter, so it depending on where it actually lands. But we'll get a map today, a general map of the area. We did put in for a IR flight, which would pick up all the heat signatures last night, but it got UTF'd, unable to fill. And so they didn't fly it. With cloud cover that's coming and the rain, they're not going to be able to fly it either. So we'll get more accurate maps as the smoke clears, but we'll get a preliminary one to you today. I'll make sure that we email it to you today as soon as we get it available. It should be within 2 hours. It'll have a size and kind of a general area where it's at. So we'll get that to you.
Bing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Say, Ron, is the fire over in that Boulder area over there, there's no houses anymore being threatened? There's most of the fire out down on the bottom of that area, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, that's looking good, Bing. That's a good question. So that's really where Rick Connell's team focused most of their efforts, was protecting the infrastructure and the homes that survived that fire and trying to make it a safe environment for people to reintroduce the population back into the fire area. And Rick opened the whole fire area. So I got a good feel that it's in good shape around there. And if residents see any smoke, they just go through 911. We'll get an engine over and address it. But we haven't had a call regarding smoke around the structures in days.
one more question, Ron. You know, so since this fire started down there in the bottom, is there going to be any trespass issues with that fire brought against the tribe with homeowners and whatnot up there?
Not that I'm aware of. I'd be surprised. They know we put in all our efforts to try to stop that fire. The homeowners were in support of the efforts that we provided. I mean, that was a weird wind event that, you know, that no one had influence over. And once those winds surfaced, kind of what, like the fire up that we just had Crooks, once that gets established, there's not much you can do to them. They're coming, and the best thing you can do is get out of the way. In that situation, we actually engaged.
With the houses and structures that were lost up there, that was my reason for asking that question, you know, because
Oh, yeah. So the BIA would assume responsibility in the tort claim if one was to arise. We fight fire for the BIA. We're through Public Law 638. So we follow all the BIA rules and regulations. The superintendent's actually the signature of the line officer. So that protects the tribe.
Any other questions for Ron?
So with the Highway 35, you know, we still have concerns about trees falling. It's been so windy the last couple of days that we've cut that operation off. There's still some work there that we need to do to safe off 35. We've got a contracted felling operation that's going to work that for us, and we're coordinating with the Department of Transportation, temporarily close parts of that road while we fall the rest of those hazard trees. So that's one other piece that's going on that I think is important to the overall objectives that we have for Boulder.
Okay, if there's
right.
no other questions for Ron. Thank you, and
Thank you.
stay safe out
Yes,
there.
ma'am.
Okay. Is our bear team ready? Okay, go ahead.
We are. So thank you, Madam Chairwoman and honorable council members for the opportunity to come to this beautiful place in the world and assist you in in assessing, you know, impacts of the Crooks and Boulder 2700 fire. I think I speak for the whole team when I say it's rare that we have, you know, such an integrated response with our team and with the resource professionals that we have here, and pretty much every component that we worked on this fire, whether it was forestry with Sean and Sheena Shaw, wildlife with Shannon and Kaylee, Casey Ryan helping us with hydrology, Katie, your TIPO, you know, integrating with our cultural resource specialists. It was truly a team effort, and really, I think the product speaks to that because of the quality that you'll see in the coming days as we wrap it up. So my thanks is to you all for making that a priority, and to certainly the resource professionals that we worked so closely with, and frankly, they did a lot of the writing of that plan. That is really important and really helpful. So as we move through this presentation, you'll hear a variety of voices. Myself as the team lead, Heath Bailey is our team lead trainee and also our cultural resource specialist, and Scott Shepard is our hydrologist on the team that will speak to the watershed issues. So we'll turn things over and kind of pass things back and forth to kind of give you a run through of what the issues that were presented to us, the observations we made in the field, and some treatment recommendations that we're making as a team. So and certainly we'll hope to have some questions from you all here, but in the coming days as the final plan gets pulled together. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heath to kind of kick us off and go through the beginning of the presentation. So thank you.
Good morning. Honorable Chairwoman, Tribal Council. I want to again reiterate what a distinct pleasure it's been to serve the Confederated Tribes, your lands, to uphold the trust responsibility from Interior and to advocate for these amazing resources in this special place. I pinch myself that I still get to do this work year in, year out. And so thank you for that opportunity that's placed this great team of scientists and resource stewards in this place, in this time. For that, we are grateful, and that opportunity is not lost on us. So thank you. So we talked in our opening meeting a little bit about the issues presented to us and how they inform our team composition. And those concerns gave us these resource focuses you see in the slide here. So team leads, of course, GIS specialists, hydrologists, cultural resource specialists, foresters, wildlife biologists, and range specialists. And
We're not seeing your slides.
oh no. Stand by one. You're on. How's that? Okay. You can see now? Okay, great. So not unlike what Mr. Riggs said earlier, of note is the fact that each national team member had a local subject matter expert from the Confederated Tribes to inform their work, and vice versa, as this was sort of an intentional two-way learning and collaborative process. And the national team, of course, brings process, and the tribal resource specialists bring knowledge and expertise specific to these lands that we simply don't have. And in that model, which is intentional, we aim to produce a plan that makes recommendations that are self-determined by the Confederated Tribes, and at the same time is couched in policy, directive, and guidance from Interior. So here you see the Boulder Fire, just over 2,000 acres. Its origin is still under investigation. You'll note the various severity classes you see here, red representing high severity, yellow moderate, light green being low severity, and the heavier darker green is unburned. So you'll note that high severity is seen in a slender sort of margin of acres, and the brunt of the fire is comprised of moderate severity and low severity with some unburned. And this is the Crooks Fire, a lightning start. Notable, of course, is the fact that this satellite imagery was flown several days ago, as we just talked about, and the fire has grown to the east and the southeast. But to our knowledge, it still doesn't threaten life, property, et cetera, or natural and cultural resources of critical concern. And neither is it burning downslope towards the South Fork of the Jocko to any great extent. So, but more on that later. I suspect there might be some questions at the end of the presentation about that. So, and these things you all know because we talked about them in our opening meeting, but emergency stabilization, you'll hear that tossed around quite a bit in the course of the presentation, or ES as we refer to it. Its objectives specifically are to reduce threats to human life, safety, property, identify threats to critical cultural and natural resources, and determine needs and prescribe emergency treatments, promptly stabilize and prevent unacceptable degradation to those resources. And of note is the fact that emergency stabilization occurs within 1 year post-fire. Again, a review of what we call BAR, or burned area rehabilitation. This happens years 2 to 5 post-fire. It's specifically aimed at repairing or improving fire damaged lands unlikely to recover naturally, and as well as to identify future opportunities to rehabilitate the burned area. Here you see a summary of treatments for the Boulder Fire specifically, focused on road drainage, culvert replacement, storm patrols, we call it, in essence, cleaning the roads, culverts, et cetera, after rain events and storm events. A geotechnical assessment is also recommended. And we'll hear a little bit more about that later. In essence, that is to analyze slopes and the potential for mass wasting after major storm events or during your wettest times of the year when you might see soil saturation on those slopes that have burned. Hazard warning signs, and then just general oversight and supervision of the project. Those recommended treatments total $130,000, $241 for ES. For BAR, noxious weeds treatment is something we do post-fire, namely along roads and disturbed context, dozer lines, et cetera. And then the brunt of it is reforestation for conifers and for white bark pine specifically. We'll hear a bit more about that later. And then for the Crooks Fire, at this time, we're recommending emergency stabilization treatments to the tune of $4,650 and BAR treatments to the tune of $3,690. I should go back to the last slide and speak a little bit to the BAR sum. So the sum total is $610,000 for burned area emergency rehabilitation within the Boulder 2,700 footprint. And then I'll lead out with cultural resources so far as the work that myself and Katie McDonald, your TIPO, did. And we collaborated on that work over the course of the last week. And I'll say too that our foremost concerns were for access by tribal members and traditional uses in proximity to both fires. And specific access east of the Boulder 2,700 fire where tribal members have usufructory rights or treaty rights to hunt off reservation. We also entertained potential impacts to the remnants of a CCC field camp situated on a terrace above the Jocko River nearby the Crooks Fire. So Katie and I had a great time working together on this, but we made no recommendations for emergency stabilization or rehabilitation, as any of those concerns we had were alleviated by treatments from other shops like road specifications from hydrology or cultural planting from the forestry shop. At this time, access for traditional uses remain intact and areas burned will recover naturally in all likelihood in time, and so will the culturally important plants and animals found in those fire areas. Specifically, consultation with the preservation program will be important for any ground disturbing activities recommended or any plan amendments that might come in the out years. So that's it for cultural resources. I will hand it over to my colleague, Mr. Scott Shepard, for hydrology.
Good morning, Chairwoman. Good morning, Council. And thanks for the opportunity to briefly present these processes and results. I'd also like to thank Casey Ryan and Shauna Jensen for being amazing members of the hydrology team. So the slide in front of you is showing a couple of different burn severity products, starting with one that we collect from satellites, the bark image or burned area reflectance classification, and the lower image is the soil burn severity. And the soil burn severity reflects what we saw on the ground and the impacts of the fire to soil, which is what we in the hydrology world are concerned about post-fire. There are also pictures of the various burn severities there to give you an idea of what we saw on the ground. Most notably, you'll see that the red or the severe was brought down quite a bit when we looked at the fire at the soil scale. So what may have looked bad or what looks really bad for the vegetation loss is not nearly as bad for the soil, meaning that there will be regeneration before very long. Next slide, please. So we took the information that we gathered in the field and we put it through a variety of hydrologic models. Hill slope erosion is the process that we are most concerned about, not as much of the greater watershed contribution, but what's going to run off of the hills directly adjacent to the highway at the lower portion of the fire. What we found with these models, you'll also see that the USGS debris flow model is highlighted there with many hazardous areas at the lower portion of the fire, corroborating our on the ground professional judgment. There's also a clear water hydrology model that was run there, shown on the right portion of the screen. And that gives us an idea of changes to peak flow runoff rates. Again, not as concerned about that as we are about the lower hill slope erosion, but a point of interest with the clear water hydrology or the runoff from the upper watersheds is we've learned from Casey that the flow tends to diminish as we go downhill, meaning that it's going somewhere into the sort of soil that is at the lower toe slope. It is very absorbent of water. And we expect that to increase as a function of the fire and the loss of vegetation. And that triggers another concern, which I'll speak to in a second, and which Keith alluded to a moment ago. Yes. Okay, just a moment, please. The cursor is always difficult to find.
Go back to the presentation. Sorry. Yeah, put that in. Screen share. Go to one slide.
This is
Your screen. Maybe stop sharing.
I think if you just go to slideshow on the top. And then from current slide.
We can handle hydrologic models, but not PowerPoint presentations, apparently.
Is everyone seeing that?
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. And it is next slide, please.
Sure.
Charmel, I think if you go to view and to presenter view, it should just bring up that slide. On the very top bar. The slideshow review and then view. Next one over. There you go. One click notes.
So if you can just click on where it says notes, it'll take notes off.
Okay, apologies. Where I was leaving off was that water tends to go into the hill slope as it travels down through the watershed. And then I was starting to talk about our treatments. Our treatments are hazard warning signs to inform public entering burned areas of hydrologic concerns, as well as rolling rocks and erosion concerns, things like this. We have a storm patrol specified as well. That will be a group of people to go out and maintain the ditches, be sure that any of the debris that has flown downhill won't cause more problems. One of our big specifications will be for drainage improvements along the 2000 road that will be maintaining the ditches, replacing those burned culverts, and ensuring proper drainage. We also specified a culvert replacement on the 2700 road just to ensure that flow capacity is met. And the geotechnical assessment is what I was starting to allude to, as well as Heath, as far as where that water is going into the hill slope. Will it cause a further problem with that increased amount of water seemingly disappearing? And we'll get some expertise out here. We've allotted funding to get that expertise out here to ensure that proper warnings are made if there is indeed a concern. And of course, we've made contact with the local stakeholders and emergency services. I'm sure this is a familiar list of folks that you've been in contact with probably constantly. And I just wanted to reiterate that in the post-fire environment, this communication is still very important. And notably, the National Resource Conservation Service, or the NRCS, can help fund some post-fire treatments on private ground where we're unable to, so they could be a resource for citizens in the future.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And so I'll sort of bring the presentation home with kind of the natural resource side of things, and some closeout information just for steps for moving forward. So we worked really closely with Tony and Sean and Sheena Shaw on the forestry assessment, and they did a great job of getting us the information we needed to fit into the plan for some of the treatments we're recommending. But as you can imagine, seeing some of the burn severity maps, there's a loss of timber resources in both fires potentially. Certainly in the Boulder 2700, but also in the Crooks fire as it continues to grow. And some forest inventory plots were also destroyed, and their feeling is that, because of the lack of seed source, natural regeneration would be, fairly slow. So with that information in mind, we worked to develop a burned area rehabilitation specification that's focused on reforestation in the commercial forest, and then also in the certain white bark pine stands, to the tune of 800 acres and 80 acres across the Boulder 2700 fire. In terms of other issues, Heath mentioned noxious weed control, invasive weed control. Burned areas are notorious. The vegetation's been removed, so it's sort of a blank canvas for weeds to get in to an area. That coupled with fire suppression activities, along roads, there's hellispots, there's drop points, there's a lot of engines, equipment moving in and out. Those can introduce weeds as well. So to help mitigate that, we've proposed multiple years of weed treatment that'll be up to the tribe as to determine what the best method is for that, to make sure that those things don't get a foothold and further degrade habitat in these burned areas or in these disturbed areas. On the wildlife front, you're blessed with amazing species of wildlife that use this area. There's a few that are under the federal listed, or are federally listed as threatened. Those, the lynx, grizzly bear, and bull trout. But there's also just amazing ungulate species like elk and moose and mule deer, and then predators like black bear and wolf and wolverine that all make use of this area. So there's obviously a temporary impact, as the habitat's been slicked off and set back. But as we talked about in that burn severity, and even some of the mapping that Sean and the forestry folks did, it's a mosaic burn pattern. There's things that are heavily burned and some that we've already seen regeneration, from choke cherry when we were out there, that's already sprouting back. One of Shannon's concerns was the elk calving areas on the lower kind of flat. It did have some high severity, although it's a relatively small piece of ground, relative to the entire range. So we don't have any wildlife specific recommendations, but the forestry reforestation treatments, as well as the weed treatments, are just going to help habitat come back on its own and should be fine. And just recommend keeping an eye on things and having the opportunity to actually do some potential monitoring for wildlife use in the burned area. So that's the bulk of our assessments and treatments. I have some sort of background and just some reminders. The ES portion of this funding, you have one year plus 21 days from the start of the fire. So that puts us out to about early September of 2022 to get treatments done on the ground. There's an amendment process that you have the option to use where you can things come to light and amendments can be put in. However, that doesn't restart the clock. We're still held to that 1 year and 21 day timeline. And moving forward, just a couple of reminders for the tribe and for BIA. So we're wrapping things up. The plan will be coming together, a draft final plan in the next day and a half, which we'll distribute through tribal staff. Once that moves through, it'll go to up the chain of command through BIA, starting at the agency, up through the region. And because of the cost of the plan, mainly because of the forestry specs, it will need national approval. And Daryl Martinez, our interagency bear coordinator, can help shepherd that through for those approvals. It's really important for the tribe to identify an implementation leader, that point person who's going to make sure the contracts get written, administrative things, treatments get employed on the ground, and just sort of that budgetary and administrative housekeeping that needs to be done to keep track of things and keep things on schedule. It's a really important position. And then start the treatment implementation as soon as we can. And I pulled out the geotechnical assessment and getting that contract in place soon to start that sampling through soil cores on that lower slope, just to see what's happening post-fire and what's going to continue to happen through the fall and winter and spring, to make sure that slope stability is in place and acting accordingly based on those results. And finally, there's accomplishment reporting that happens yearly, and then a final closeout report, that's pretty standard for this type of process. So just something to consider as we work through this. So that's the end of our presentation. We certainly have hopefully some time for questions, and apologies for the technical difficulties with Zoom. Yeah, again, thank you all for your support, and thank you, to the staff that worked with us, Ron and his crew, and as well as your forestry, wildlife, cultural resource folks. And it was really truly an honor and pleasure to work with them, and they frankly made our job a lot easier. So it's about all we have.
So I guess my question on the boulder fire is, I know we're concerned with our property, but what about MDOT and their, I know we probably have to wait for that geotechnical assessment before they make their plan, but how do we work with them? I know they're a cooperator, but how does that work through the bear process?
Yeah, so Scott and Shauna have already reached out to them and other folks, as you saw on his one slide, started to share some modeling results, some information with them that there's a potential concern, and certainly they're aware of that and want to protect their road. And so we can certainly, when that geotechnical information starts to come in, we'll be, this will be, months down the road, potentially, but would advocate to, distribute those results, as far and wide to those folks as well. And, Scott mentioned NRCS, which is an entity that can bring money to bear on private ground if there's point protection that needs to happen, and things like that. So we've opened those lines of communication, and I would advise just continuing, whether that's Casey or your hydrologic shop or your emergency management folks, just to kind of keep information moving back and forth, as things change over the next few months as weather comes in and we turn from summer to fall and winter.
Sharmell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just missed the total amount of the emergency stabilization on the Boulder fire.
Yes, ma'am. As it stands right now, emergency stabilization for Boulder 2700 is $130,241 as it sits currently.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess my only other question is how, in your modeling, how does this affect our fisheries in the lake? I know you talked some about culverts and whatnot, but is there potentially an impact?
Of course, there's potentially an impact, but it's not anticipated. It's what we are concerned about in the hydrology in the post-fire situation is intense rainfall. So if we get a really intense rainfall on that really high burned area, that's where we'll see the biggest impact to the lake. However, that's not anticipated. That would be a pretty targeted storm, and still it would be a fairly limited amount of sediment compared to the volume of that lake.
Yeah, and just to add to that, from the fish side of it, the non-hydrologic side of it is, I mean, it is a relatively, the way I would think of it is, sort of an eyedropper into a bucket. You right there at those outlets, yeah, there's going to be a water quality, temporary water quality issue potentially, but that's going to be very short-lived, and compared to the size of the lake, it's going to be muted pretty quickly.
Any questions from council?
Yeah, I have a question.
Anita? Anita and then Lynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't see where there was any fencing now, on either of the two. Is that gonna be a problem if people come forward and say, well, my boundary fences were burned out? I haven't got to see the fire, but.
Yeah, so to our knowledge, and this was certainly something I believe you brought up, on Tuesday, last Tuesday, we saw no burned fences and had no reports of any burned fences. It's not to say that they don't exist out there. And if it is something that's an issue that we didn't see or address, it can be amended in the plan. But to our knowledge, there weren't any burned fences at this point.
Okay, Lynn?
All right, thank you. And thank you guys for the presentation this morning. I really appreciate that information and the importance of it. What I would like to know specifically is, once the plan is approved and we start to implement it, does Bear bring in their own team, or is there going to be an opportunity for us to create jobs here where we can use our tribal members and our tribal member contractors to work on the project?
Yeah, that's a great question, council member. And it is, the money goes here for you to decide how to use that. We don't bring Bear team members in to help implement unless that request comes. It's up to the tribe to, determine an implementation leader, a roads crew, all of those sorts of things. That's definitely in your purview to do with as you see fit, and happens typically on almost every assignment we're on.
All right, that's good to know. Thank you.
Tony, are you our implementation leader?
Short answer, no. No, Sean will be the implementation leader, working with Casey. They'll take lead on this, on implementation. A lot of it will be with reforestation, as they said. We'll take the lead on that for sure. We'll consult with Casey and hydrology and fisheries on the road infrastructure work, the culvert stuff. And there will be some opportunity there where we can have some contractors, equipment contractors come in and help with that for sure. And I just wanted to point out that this is a draft plan, and they're still able to amend it and add a few things like fencing for sure. If we do find fencing in there, our initial recon of it, we didn't find fencing in there. It is something that we had asked before in previous Bear plans and been funded. So we'll just, this fire is still growing, it's still active. So right now we've got a great placeholder, great start of a plan, and we can amend it down the road.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you to the team for the really comprehensive report, and thank you to all of our natural resource and preservation crew, forestry, everybody that was involved in this. And we look forward to the final plan and getting the work done. So thank you so much for your quick response and assembling the team and getting here. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been our pleasure.
Thank you. It's our honor and our duty.
You guys ready for a break? Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break. Okay, next up, we have Ruth. Her information starts on page 3 in the packet.
Next. Before we go into that issue on page 3, I have an emergency approval request for capital equipment. Information technology, I'd previously procured the tower equipment for the infrastructure project. And they'd been storing it at the Kicking Horse Complex. And they were informed that John Nice needed to move that equipment out so they could house employees. So the information technology program purchased a storage container, or they needed to protect this equipment. So we need authorization of that purchase because it's after July 1st.
I'm sure I'd make that motion.
Okay, motion by Martin, second by Ellie. Questions? All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you. So then beginning on page 3, the modification 7 to FY 2021 total allocations. We have a net increase of $5,002,849 for the changes to general fund, self-governance compacts, contracts, and grants. Total allocation now would be $294,396,986.
Carol, motion to approve the resolution of modification number 7.
Okay, motion by Carol, second by Anita. Questions? All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Ruth. Jody Perez. Her info starts on page 6 in the packet.
Hi, good morning. I am requesting authorization to prepare a grant application to the Minnesota Housing Partnership. They want to provide technical assistance and financial assistance for our housing needs assessment and homelessness study. So I would, excuse me, I'd be applying on behalf of the tribe.
Madam Chair, I'd make the motion to approve the grant application.
Motion by Martin. Second by Anita. Questions? Mike?
I got a question also.
Mike and then Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jody, who's Minnesota Housing and how come they're getting in a partnership with us?
So there was, the man who contacted me is named Warren. Let me see what his last name is. His kid went to school with Jason's son in Missoula. And so he came here and he's visited the Housing Authority because of that connection of their sons. And they have also advertised through UNAHA. That's the United Native American Housing Association, and I'm on their board. And so, but Warren, I can tell you what his last name is. But because he knows us, he wanted to help. They received a grant. Warren Kramer.
Okay, Lynn?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So Jody, how much is the grant and what exactly is the survey going to be used for?
Okay, so they didn't tell me the grant amount. I have to apply, but I'm hoping that it will be at least $50,000. I have received one estimate that I needed to draft, I guess, to the Montana Healthcare Foundation, because they are also interested in helping with this housing assessment. So the person that I asked for the estimate from is a current training and technical assistance provider, and that's Big Water Consulting. And the guy who's in charge of it, he prepared an estimate for the consultant's time and travel. And what he would do is provide scripts for the person doing the survey. So everything's formatted the same, you know, everyone gets asked the same questions. So he would provide the scripts, and then also the device, like the surveying device, because you have to be able to input it in. So he would be creating that database and cleaning up the data, and also training the people who are doing the surveys. And then we would have focus groups, and also community like leaders. We would be doing targeted interviews on them. So it's a household survey, and then also the focus groups and community surveys. So the estimate I got, it was almost $150,000. And so I'm applying for 50 from the Montana, excuse me, Healthcare Foundation. And then I have set aside 51,500 of my block grant funds. And then if we get the grant from the Minnesota Housing Partners, then I'll have enough to do the study. And this will support all of our decisions, so we can make database decisions on what the needs are for our community, and also how the impact from, you know, unstable housing is affecting health, schools, economy, you know, like how it's all connected. So the consultant also put in the estimate to do the final report and a presentation of the final report. And the plan is that if I find the funds, then I've talked to Polson, the city of Polson, and the city of Ronan so far, and they would do the surveys within their boundaries. So I want to talk to Mission, Ronan, Hot Springs, Dixon, Arlee, and everyone would do within their boundaries. We would give them the tools, and then they would have input on what's in the survey too. And then they would conduct it within theirs, and I would conduct it outside of their area. So like Turtle Lake, Mission Dam home sites, like that. So we would spread out the work and have a collaborative project for all the municipalities to join in, and we all benefit from having the data.
Madam Chair.
Carol?
Madam Chair. Yeah, Jody, this assessment helps us to be able to access the funding that we're getting, correct? From, I can't remember the.
Yes, the homeowner assistance fund, it also requires a homeowner needs assessment. So that would be one area that this housing assessment would cover.
So not only is this going to be information that we can use as a tribe, but it helps us access that money so we can help our tribal members.
Correct.
Pay rent, is it rent or no? Mortgages and all of those other things that come along with it. So I'll make a motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, motion by Carol. Second by Martin. I have a question. My question is, so this survey is going to be designed to survey all the residents about our homelessness situation, and does it also address affordable housing? Because of the influx of climate change refugees, COVID refugees, because I'm seeing people outside the normal homelessness stereotype that are, being evicted because their landlord is selling their properties or whatever. So that's my first question. My second question is, I guess I hope this information will be in a format that's usable beyond SCAHA's purposes. Because I think that serves a certain clientele, but there's other people that don't qualify for that or don't want to be under housing authority. And so I'm just wondering how you're working with or is this the team that we've identified through the resolution that we passed?
So the resolution just authorizes for technical assistance and to apply for financial assistance. So in my conversations with him, he has staff that could help guide this survey. And I would probably have to do an RFP because I'm using some of my federal grant funds. So I'm gonna have to do an RFP to have somebody conduct this survey. And I've never done this before. It's out of my, I guess, experience, and I want to make sure I do it right. So he can help me make sure I'm doing it right. And then I wanted to have the help of all the municipalities in our area so that they have, the questions that they need answers to can be included on the survey. So I'm hoping it's a win-win for everybody. And I totally agree that housing serves just a small piece of the pie. We have our NAHASDA block grant that we use every year, and it only serves low-income individuals that are eligible. And so I am fully aware it's like just a fraction of the pie, and this will be to encompass the whole pie. Is my dream. And he also explained that with these, we're not going to be going door to door to door to door. We will be doing sampling that tries to get an accurate picture of that community. And so it won't be like 100% accurate, but it will give us a really good overall view of what's the real situation, doubled up, tripled up, homeless, like what we're dealing with. So it will help us quantify all of the things that we need to measure in order to make good decisions and have a better understanding of our housing situation. And we can include, when we do for homelessness, we could include for climate change and COVID reasons also. And in my mind, and I've never even, I went to a couple different meetings when Mineral County and Sanders County did their housing needs assessment. So I'm familiar with that, but the way I see it is that the people conducting the surveys would have like a tablet and they would literally go through and click what the answer is, and then that answer would generate what the next one is, so that we have not everyone is going to be answering the same exact question. So like our tribal members, what our tribal members are going to be answering. So that's the way I see it, but I've never done it before, so this is all new to me.
Thank you for that, Jody. Abby, can you repeat the motion and the second?
I originally had a motion by Martin and a second by Anita, but then now I have a motion by Carol and a second by Martin.
Okay, scratch the last motion. Any other questions? Mike has a question. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, does this survey trigger the IRB review process?
That would be something for them to look into.
So once we get the survey outlined or drafted, then I would send it for review.
Okay,
And
Okay,
who
all those in
would I
favor?
send it to?
You'd send it to Stacy Sherwin at SKC.
All right, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have an interview for the Fish and Wildlife Board.